Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar for GreenTech Metals Limited, ASX code GRE, a company with a strong portfolio of highly prospective battery metal assets located in the West Pilbara region of Western Australia. In just a moment, I'll be introducing GreenTech's Executive Director, Mr. Tom Reddicliffe, and their recently appointed Technical Adviser, Mr. Julian Hanna, who together will be leading today's presentation. A full presentation has been lodged with the ASX earlier today, which looks at the entire portfolio of assets held by GreenTech, but it's not the intention to run through this full presentation today. Rather, today's presentation will focus specifically on the company's Whundo Copper Project. Mr. Hanna, as GreenTech's Technical Advisor, will provide valuable insights into the exploration techniques being employed for volcanic mass sulfide cluster deposits, He'll also review the significant progress made so far at Whundo and why this project is grabbing not just his, but a lot of people's attention. Following the presentation, both Tom and Julian will be available to answer any questions. So as we go through the session, feel free to submit any questions you have via the Q&A button on your screen, and I will put them directly to Tom and Julian during the Q&A segment. All right, let's begin. I'm pleased to introduce GreenTech Metals Executive Director, Mr. Tom Reddicliffe, and their new Technical Advisor, Mr. Julian Hanna, to present to you. Tom, Julian, over to you.
Thanks, David. Welcome, guests. Just quickly on the background of GRE. It's a very young company by comparison with others. We listed very early in 2022. In fact, the first company to list on ASX in 2022. And as David pointed out, it was on a battery metal focused suite of projects. Today we'll mainly focus on what we have in the West Pilbara because that is our main focus at the moment. And we have about 225 square kilometres under tenure, and in two areas, as you can see on the plan. Up to the north, we have our lithium projects just next door to Azure Minerals, and we've got about 20 odd kilometres or more held under tenure there in a very fertile, what we call the lithium corridor. And we've got lithium-bearing pegmatites in there, and one tenement is in JV with Artemis Resources, and the other one is wholly owned by the Roosevelt tenement is held by 100% by GreenTech. To the south, which is our focus today, is where our copper project is, Whundo. And that's what we'll be looking at today. We've got about, just on the company itself, 83 million shares on issue and in very good shape at the moment. So just moving on to the management of the company. Just the board, a very small board, comprising myself and non-executive directors, Rod Webster, who's a mining engineer, experienced in copper projects, and Guy Robinson, our CFO and co-sec. But importantly, we also have technical advisors to strengthen the team, and Michael Photius is advising us on our lithium assets and has been with us for probably close to a year now. And of course, Julian, who's just recently joined us as a technical advisor on our copper project, particularly Whundo. And of course, Julian brings a wealth of experience in this area, having moved projects from essentially where we are at through to production. And he's helping us sort out the exploration approach. Also, and importantly, of course, we have a established exploration team focused in a regional base up in Karratha, which makes life a lot easier for us. And our people up there spend a lot of time up there working on Whundo and our other projects in the West Pilbara. Now, just a quick overview of Whundo before we hand over to Julian. The Whundo is essentially a BMS deposit, high grade copper zinc, massive sulfide. We're currently sitting on 6.2. We have a resource of 6.2 million tonnes, about 1% copper, 1% zinc, Okay, and from inception, when we acquired the project from Artemis Resources, the resource was 2.7 million tonnes. So over a period of just over 12 months, maybe 13 months, we managed to build that up to 6.2 million tonnes just by simply drilling. And we've had a lot of success in this area, and we're hoping to have further success as we move forward, because following a review earlier this year, as to where do we find additional tonnes for this project, and we saw that there was a lot of potential chasing these ore bodies, or rather these mineralised bodies at the moment down dip. And one of the reasons is that was based on drilling and chasing EM targets, that they kept, every time we drilled and did EM, they were continuing down depth. So, and to date, over 91%, you can see there, of the drilling to date, and there's been a lot of drilling, over 1,200 odd drill holes in that project area, mainly over resource drilling on Whundo itself. But the vast majority of it is less than 150 metres deep, and it's only more recently this year that we've actually pushed the hole down to over 600 metres. So we're, I guess, excited that we can see this opportunity to increase the resources. Also, at the same time, and running in parallel with what we do with our drilling and sampling, is that we're looking at development options going forward. And we've entered into a base metal alliance with Annex Metals, who are progressing their project hopefully to development. And their aim is to have a processing hub at Wim Creek, which is about 100 kilometres away. So we're looking at that opportunity. And also we're looking at doing, in the near term, these conceptual mining studies to see what a conceptual operating mine at Whundo may look like, and we'll outline what we should be chasing in terms of tonnes. But on that note, I will hand over to Julian, who can talk in more detail and on the Whundo project and what it means.
Yep, thanks, Tom. On with the next slide there, please, Dave. And welcome to everyone on the call. Firstly, on your right-hand side there, you can see a satellite image of the mining license. This is 100% owned by GreenTech. One of the important things here that Tom has touched on, just fabulous infrastructure location. You couldn't hope to get better than where Whundo is located. In the top right corner is a 2-lane bitumen road that runs all the way up 40 kilometres to Karratha. For those who haven't been to Karratha, it's a highly sophisticated mining services hub, which provides every service, every accommodation requirement, everything that people need to work in this area. And it also, that proximity is, in a sense, 40 kilometres, means really opens up the potential that if Whundo does develop into a mining operation here, it's unlikely to need to build an accommodation village and on site. You can simply bus people down the road. They can have their families there. It creates a stable environment for people to work in. And as many of you know, it's quite competitive for employment for people in mining and processing industries. So the better the infrastructure, I guess, to attract people to a job, that really is quite a valuable opportunity for us. What you're seeing on the screen there is that white outline is really the outline of the mineralized VMS hosting sequence of rocks. It sort of forms a hockey stick shape. And the yellow shapes within that are the footprints of the EM conductive plates and highly anomalous conductive areas that you'll see on the next slide, but we're not ready to move to that one yet. So you can see 6 of those in a row. There's potentially a 7th one in amongst all of this as well. But over a 2-kilometre strike length, this is our main target. This is what we're trying to demonstrate has a lot of potential here for significant mineralisation. The arrows pointing to the north are showing basically how this thing dips to the north at 45 degrees. It is, to geologists on the call, effectively a syncline, and the keel, if you like, of that syncline is where those 2 open pits are. And they're the Whundo West and Whundo East open pits. They were historic, shallow 30, 40 metre deep oxide copper open pits. And the resource area and the majority of drilling by far, like 90% plus, sub 150 metres in depth, is drilling out resources around about 4 million tonnes plus at over 1% copper in that shallow open pit area in the keel. Other things to note is the reddish outline you can see on the right-hand half of this image is the unconformity at the base of the Hardy sandstone. This is a sheet of horizontal bedding which is masking and has masked from previous explorers the potential extensions of this Whundo mineralisation to the north up to the lease boundary. So it's flat, it's relatively thin, and it's clearly prospective, continuing right up to that sort of northern boundary on the right-hand side. Historically, apart from the open pit mining, there was small-scale bonanza grade copper mining at Yannery, underground, some spectacular grades there. And that is only because there's a small window through that sandstone cover at that spot. But the EM can see through that, and as we go further to the north, the EM's signature starts to drop away simply because of depth of cover. But that's fine. We'll touch on that coming up. If you can move to the next slide there, please. This is the EM data. This is a fixed loop ground data along the main corridor as it is today. The two pits shown in crosshatch in white down the bottom, and a very intense Austin Whundo EM conductor immediately north of those pits. And this is an area of obviously great interest to us. And it sits right in the keel of the syncline. And it sort of fades away to the north, as you'd expect. As a conductor gets deeper, it tends to lose its intensity. So that for us is number one target, to see what we can do there to expand that current 4 million tonne resource. Is it a viable open pit proposition? And how we can chase that dip down plunge to the north. The other shapes you see in yellow outline there, Shelby, in sort of midway along this 2 kilometre belt here, is an extremely strong 15,000 Siemens downhole EM conductor plate. It's been modelled below the existing drilling and extending 400 metres to the north down plunge below the existing drilling. So that is a very high priority target in its own right. Yannery is very, very minor amount of drilling. We have an as yet unnamed subtler EM feature if you follow that chain of pearls to the north, if you like. There's a circular feature at this stage, but that'll be certainly target for us to follow up on with more EM and see where that leads. But that has the makings of potentially being yet another sulfide body. And then you go further up Asia. This is really an interesting situation. This early drilling demonstrated it was clear zonation of VMS type. It has high-grade zinc at the top and the shallow holes, and very high-grade copper and wide intersections further down to the limit of drilling, which is not deep. So intersections there, Asia, there is a small resource around that currently, which just takes it to the surface and includes oxide, and in effect is just giving us some encouragement, but there are some spectacular results, and we'll show you some drill core from Asia. So just to put that in context, that's the northern limit of drilling. There's no drilling to the north of that into the top right corner. So if we look at the next slide, we'll see a long section through the deposit as it is today, A to B, north on the left-hand side. I'll start on the right-hand side, the Whundo resource in blue, 4+ million tonnes in here, plenty of room for extension, and the underlying Austin deposit, which has been currently still not in resource, but is headed down that path. They appear to be stacked and folded and being part of the keel of the syncline. Then you step north with no drilling through that zone, which has no colour, it's black background there. And you can see the Shelby mineralisation outlined in green, not yet at resource. Some small EM plates that were identified there initially, and then very recently, in the last 2 to 3 months there, Tom, if I get that right, there was drilling, no drilling plan. Sorry, let's start again on that. That red bar you're seeing is an EM conductive plate, very high conductivity. There's nothing else that we're aware of in the system that is conductive. So we're regarding this as a very high priority for drill targeting. There was one near miss RC hole that didn't actually reach target, but it didn't know the existence of that plate. So that's that orange shape that you can see there. That will be very high on our list to try and demonstrate that. It's very tempting to think that possibly down the keel of this syncline, you know, since we're looking for big systems here, Shelby deeps on that conductive plate, and just maybe Austin, Whundo connected through that area. So that would be one of our top priority areas for doing downhole and further infill surface EM to try and define this area better. Then Yannery, an untested down dip plate there, and then across to Asia on the left-hand side. And as I say, the two northernmost intersections in this whole system here is, I just better read them out here. In a hole, drill hole 103, I'm not sure you can see that on your screen, but 23.7 meters at 3.1% copper. That's true width according to the current interpretations. And a hole below that, 14 meters effectively at 3.4% copper. So these intersections around the 200 meter vertical depth, they would be very welcome in any VMS underground mine scenario. There are many of our peers around who will be very happy with those results, as we are as well. And I think it's a very good sign of the tenor that we're starting to see in the massive sulfide in this project, not just copper, but also zinc as well, and the zonations that we're starting to see. So early days on this project. Just a little summary on the left-hand side. What will the drilling starting in the December quarter that we're now in, of course, look to do is a series of stage programs, I should point out, but look clearly extensions to the known mineralized shoots and using downhole EM to help steer that drilling as it progresses. We're looking to discover additional massive sulfide bodies within the system that simply haven't been near enough to surface or are in the gaps between the known bodies that you can see on that long section. And then we're also looking for the potential for satellite discoveries particularly at the northern end, but also to the west of Whundo coming out of the page towards us, where that syncline swings around. So it's really quite promising. I think if we move on to the next slide, we'll see some drill core. Thanks very much. Photograph here of drilling at Shelby. This was the hole that drove the downhole EM survey, which discovered that very highly conductive and very large plate extending 400 meters below current drilling, giving us great confidence in the depth potential here. But the important thing is here, the bulk of the drilling and the bulk of the shallow mineralization is on a flat plain area. You can see this sort of scarp we're looking north here. The scarp is at the top of the plateau at the top of that jump up, if you like, is the base of the Hardy Sandstone. So that's the younger sequence of rocks providing a cover for further discoveries to the north. But that is something that EM will be able to look through and enable us to drill for other targets heading well north of not only this particular deposit, but also Asia, which is itself another 800 meters north of this drill rig. Drill core from Asia, just trying to remind people and investors potentially here that, it's really high-grade copper mineralization. Some very nice numbers here, 24 meters at 3.2. It is massive matrix stringer sulfides. We're also hoping to see zonation of the copper minerals within the system as well and try and understand that. So one of my first jobs with the guys up there in Karratha will be to go through the drill core and look to start to understand, we're seeing chalcopyrite mineralization. Are we seeing bornite? Are we seeing chalcocite, which are the really high tenor copper minerals that very commonly occur in these styles of deposits? So, this is high grade, massive sulfide. in my head, this is only the start of it. If we can move on to the next slide, please. Just making a little comment here about copper, and you know, there's a lot of commentary about copper, and you know, Mr. Friedland is probably the most vocal, and many of you heard his presentations that we need, you know, 3 times, 10 times, you know, the number of existing producing mines in the next 10 or 15 years, wherever he's got to, I'm not sure, but you know, the bottom line is, having been involved in copper in Botswana for 7 years recently, and talking to smelter owners and operators, talking to battery manufacturers in China, understanding that copper really is the critical metal. And you know, that's all I'm going to say. I'm sure the viewers are well aware of that. But in a way, if you look at just the Australian context for a start, there's very few opportunities if you want exposure to copper that in projects that are relatively advanced. Not greenfields exploration. It's kind of going past the brownfields. This is a project that's heading in a direction, and if it all goes to plan towards production. And then there's also, on top of that, this closure of recent mines that have been around a long time. You know, Nifty, going back a couple of years, to Grassa was the foundation block for Sandfire. Here's Sandfire today, nudging $5 billion market cap, although its assets are outside of Australia now, being Botswana, but also obviously up in Spain and Portugal as well, and in Montana. Any one of the intersections we're seeing at Asia would match any one of those intersections that they get excited about. Alternate supply is a problem for copper, and as geologists and talking to guys with boots on the ground all over the place, we struggle to see where it's going to come from. You know, there are many issues there that you've got to consider, ESG and all that sort of thing, jurisdictional issues, and really people are being pushed out into high-cost locations. High Arctic Canada is currently a hotspot for copper exploration, and there's some very successful discoveries being made there. However, the cost of mining, the cost of maintaining workforce, all those sort of things need to be taken into account. And then if you're looking at the sort of the massive Chilean type porphyries, declining grade is a big issue, and they're energy intensive, and of course that brings into play all sorts of things about community issues and tailings and waste rock, where you put all that sort of stuff. So I think, you know, this footprint of VMS deposits is one of the real attractions. You know, VMS deposits historically have small footprints, and they tend to grow, and they tend to kind of maintain mine depletion effect by reserve and resource extension. So that's what we're hoping may happen here. VMS deposit current clusters, I think most people are aware of that, suited both to open pit and underground, and we may have both options available to us here as well at Whundo. This was a little bit of a, I don't know, a bit of a sample, I guess, of probably Western Australia's best known VMS deposit, Gossan Hill, up at not that far from Perth, really, 400 kilometres up the road at Golden Grove. How it started out when mining commenced back in the mid-90s there, what it has evolved into, it was, you know, kilometre long, 400 or 500 metres deep, and just kept growing. And I think their resource base is still in the range of 50 million tonnes at 1.7 copper. They've drilled it down about 2 Ks. I think they're currently mining around about 1.5 Ks in that range. But, you know, these deposits, if you get onto them and you get a bit of luck and things move in the right direction, can get big. And the other one is low environmental footprint, you know, because you know, permitting is obviously an issue in Western Australia and everywhere else probably on the planet. Most, not everywhere else, many other metal jurisdictions. But, you know, it's all about permitting timeline as well if you're getting a project up and over the line. So, you know, I think Whundo is a standout. With the drilling that's planned, we're not looking at just adding small incremental. We would like to think that we're targeting a step change in the scale of this project and this resource. If we can move to the next slide, there's just one more slide for me, I think. I'll hand back to Tom. There's a bit of a timeline Gantt chart here that we're operating to, and Tom's ticked all the boxes, and and his team, reviewing Whundo and just getting the data together and compiling historic and starting to make sense of this thing. Building an alliance with Annex up the road, and look forward to meeting the people involved with that at some stage in the near future. Stage 1 drilling was really very successful in the sense that it identified downhole EM as being very efficient at finding conductive plates below the known mineralization. So now whenever we drill a hole, it will no doubt be subject to downhole EM and look right laterally, but also down dip for extension potential here. Conceptual mine studies, I think it's very important to sort of run those that are just very preliminary ideas here on open pit, and possibly giving a soft entry into underground mining and helping fund that sort of development as well in stages. Just getting that underway in parallel with the drilling, and some of the results from that study, I think, will determine the types of drilling. I'm very keen to increase the amount of diamond drilling. There's been a fair bit of RC drilling historically, but diamond adds so much more information, and in fact, directional diamond drilling for deeper targets is long-term real opportunity here as well. Getting some met test work underway early in the new year requires some diamond core, of course. A lot of the diamond core is old, it's been out in the weather too long, and that will require some larger diameter holes. So, and then really with that initial kind of what we're calling stage 2, the underlying thing here is just to scope out the scale of the system. We're not a resource drill out mode by any stretch yet, but we're just scoping out how big this thing could get to and how this could look as a potential mine or development opportunity. And then stage 3 drilling campaign there is earmarked to commence in Q2 next year, with targeting a revised resource at the end of the year. So that's probably it from me for now, Tom.
Okay. Thanks, Julian. Just on to the next slide. Look, we believe the Whundo represents a good opportunity to fast track to production, obviously subject to ongoing drilling, etc. But I think a lot of the important boxes, and the most important of which, we are on a granted mining lease. So generally no delays going forward in terms of compliance and doing further work. And the other important thing, we're only 40 kilometres from Karratha, sealed bitumen road, and Karratha, of course, a major industrial mining hub, and we get access to ports and roads and energy infrastructure there. And of course, it's barely 2 hours by commercial plane from Perth, and there are multiple regular flights by both airlines from Perth to Karratha. And of course, Karratha provides and being so close to Perth, and as well as being near Karratha, we have access to a workforce fly in, fly out, or locally dwelling, which is very good. And of course, we already have processing options on the table that we're assessing as we develop, go forward with the project. And this is, of course, our alliance with Annex, which is very important. And of course, the other one is Radio Hill, which is just north there. You can see on that plan, just some 10 kilometres from Whundo. And we're continuing to assess those as we progress the project. So, and on to the next slide. Just very quickly, the investment highlights. Yeah, we believe we've got a very attractive suite of battery metal projects, and of course the flagship is indeed Whundo. It's starting with a very good base today of 6.2 million tonnes, over 1% copper and 1% zinc, which roughly copper equivalent, close to 1.5% copper equivalent. Now we're actively pursuing resource growth on these, of course, as Julian's just pointed out, with ongoing drilling. We had great success there with doing EM and drilling, and also the opportunity to fast track because of we've got existing mining leases, and we're very close to Radio Hill, Wim Creek for that opportunity for processing. And as mentioned, for highly strategic location, you don't get projects in much better areas, virtually on the coast. We're not in the middle of the desert. We're not 800 kilometres, from a bitumen road or anything like that. So logistically, very easy to operate out here. And of course, importantly, GreenTech is in great shape, very tight capital structure, 83 million shares currently on issue. We believe this is a great investment. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Jance. Great presentation, and the focus on the Whundo Copper Project is the focus, and rightfully so, given the points that you made in the presentation today. We're going to jump straight into the Q&A, and a number of questions have come through, and I'll remind everybody, if you do wish to ask a question, submit it in writing using the Q&A button on your screen, and I'll put it directly to Julian and Tom as required. Tom, first question for you. You mentioned the team in Karratha. How handy is it having such highly experienced exploration team based so close to the project, but also sitting in a tier one, well-established town such as Karratha?
Oh, look, it's really fantastic to have that team up there. They're totally focused on the projects that we're exploring, and just for example, I suppose Whundo, it's really only half an hour's drive out of Karratha. So people, they want to take another sample, they want to do something, they don't have to fly from Perth or anything like that. They can go out there and do what they have to do, go back to the office, fully equipped office, and four-wheel drives, the whole week. So it's very important, and these guys go out on breaks, of course, but it works very well for us.
And Julian, a good question here, probably more a statement than a question. How did you first become involved with GreenTech, and what attracted you to the company?
I was doing some consulting for a small group of companies in the West Pilbara, including GreenTech, a day a week sort of thing. And then they took me up there, showed me around the site, started pulling out the drill core and then running through the information, and I just realised this, this project's kind of just waiting to move to the next level. And look, I only signed on exactly a week ago today, so I'm in a rather steep learning curve, and Tom and I are getting along famously and all that sort of thing. Good guys on site, and I'm enjoying being part of it.
You clearly like building things, and you've got a strong track record in building not just projects but also shareholder wealth. Do you think there's a chance to build something here at GreenTech?
I think so. VMS deposits that haven't already been mined are rare. To have them in such a great location is fantastic. The news flow should be very strong. I don't see any reason that this mineralisation should stop where the drilling stopped, and most of the drilling is shallow by any VMS standards. So I think there's a real value here to opportunity for investors. And look, if you just look at copper broadly, you've really only got three types of deposits. You've got the huge porphyry-hosted, very low grade and declining grade projects, mostly in South America on the Andean belt there. You've got the sediment-hosted belts, which are what the majors are being forced towards to increase the grade. Most of those are in the 1% to 2% range in Southern Africa. They sort of span from, if you go from west to east, I guess, Namibia into Botswana, where we were in the Kalahari copper belt, and then up into just touching Zimbabwe, but really Zambia and DRC. So, while Botswana is a wonderful jurisdiction and Namibia is a great place to work, the other two are slightly more complicated to deal with. So then that's the second level, and that sort of population of deposit types. And the third main one is really been dominated by Canadian production for a long time. This is VMS style, polymetallic. You have copper, you commonly have zinc, you commonly have silver, and we're seeing some quite good silver grades in Whundo as well, and you commonly have gold as well, and we're starting to see sniffs of gold in here as well. So they are deposits that, I guess, at the top end of the scale is Degrassa, which, as I say, was really the flagship and the maker of Sandfire, and enabled them to, once that closed, to move into other projects, Spain, Botswana, etc., and build a huge portfolio of long life assets in. But these VMS deposits are a really good opportunity, for a company like GreenTech and for investors as well, to add serious value and to move it ahead relatively quickly compared with these huge projects that take maybe 10 or 15 years to get permitted. Here in Peru, that's kind of what you're looking at. So,
sorry, go on.
Sorry, I'll stop there. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, viewers just picked up on the fact you mentioned that VMS clusters near infrastructure are rare and relatively undrilled. From a comparison point of view, for an investor, what should they be looking at from a comparison, both for projects in Australia and or globally?
In terms of infrastructure, was that the question?
Around VMS projects near infrastructure that sort of start opening up.
I guess if you looked at, say, Degrassa, since I mentioned it, it's 150 k's north of Meekatharra. It's admittedly right beside the Great Northern Highway, but what that required was Sandfire to put in all the accommodation, for 500 or 600 people, whatever it was, an airstrip, supply, create supply opportunities. It's a long way from the port. Obviously it was a high-grade, high-quality project that could bear all of those costs and make a huge margin to pass on to shareholders. If you look at, say, another example of Golden Grove, it's 400 k's away. It's a long way from the coast, relatively speaking, here to get your concentrate out to port. There's not that many around in Western Australia. There's another couple up in the northeastern part of the Pilbara, and I think this, we'll all end up talking to each other sooner or later in terms of how best to optimize and work together on things here. What else in Western Australia? If I was to go further east, and Nifty's been around for a long time, it's not really a VMS deposit. It's not a VMS deposit, but it's a much more remote area. In East Pilbara, it's heading out towards Telfer and out into the Paterson province there. So, there's a fair bit of copper in that part of the world as well. But, a lot of startup costs and a lot of permitting issues and a lot of retaining employment things down the track.
You've both been involved, not just here in Western Australia, but sort of around the world in the development of projects from exploration development all the way through. Are you surprised by how projects can be found so close to infrastructure, given how much activity from an exploration point of view has and does occur over the journey?
Well, I am surprised a bit, and it's sort of been held by companies that have treated each of these mineralized bodies within this 2K belt. It's almost separate prospects, and go and drill a couple of holes here, and then next year go and drill a couple of holes over there. So it does need a bit more of a unified sort of project scale approach, I think, and systematic in the sense of drilling EM. Drilling EM is the first stage, and building resources and getting the results out to the market, and then progressing those results into resource, reserve, and mining studies and so forth. So I'm quite surprised. It's kind of, and I have this. Look, you're going to get me off track here, but some of the best things out there in mineral world are just in hindsight, in plain sight. And I better not name some examples because people say, "Oh, it was wonderful science found this," but sometimes there are geologists in this town within a couple of 100 meters radius of where we are, no doubt, that kick themselves at some of these things that they could have acquired 5 or 10 or 15, 20 years ago, just have suddenly turned into something wonderful. So,
and just on sort of a follow-on question here in relation to, with mineralisation extending from the historic open pit up to Asia in the north, what potential do you see for discovering a single connected ore body? Is that a possibility with a VMS cluster style deposit?
It's a bit early to call on that, David. It is, at the moment, we're seeing these things because of lack of drilling. There's no drilling in the gaps, so we don't know that the gaps are gaps. It's a gap of information. I think what I kind of really like is this keel, the syncline keel. So where the zinc comes closest to surface and was open pit, has oxide, copper, etc., and big widths, and quite over about a 500-meter width of mineralization. That seems to be running straight down the keel. So we've got these other wonderful mineralized shoots, but I said one of the first targets that probably needs to be tested most thoroughly is that down keel plunge direction. Some very nice mineralization in Whundo. It sort of gets a bit lost in everything. I'm just going to do something I've never done before in my life before, but I'm going to hold up a piece of massive sulfide core that says Whundo zinc, 4.7% zinc, Asia zinc, not forgetting the copper components of this. There is massive sulfide. That stuff's going, that's sort of on screen, probably not, but that's going 18% zinc and 1.2% copper. So, within the system, you're going to get a range of different domains of high-grade zinc and high-grade copper. That's, I think, what we're hoping to achieve here.
If I would just add, the Whundo is basically made up of the bodies that outcrop at surface, and hence that is why there's traditionally been that focus. But now we see, of course, Shelby, which has now become a very, very exciting target, is actually blind to the current land surface, and so that speaks to other opportunities about perhaps other bodies in between the ones that are outcropping. So there's still a lot to learn on this deposit as we go forward. So, and it'll be all about drilling in the short term and EM.
Now, this webinar has all been about Whundo copper, as it should be based on everything you've just said. But Tom, there is a question here in regards to lithium. You've got a suite of exciting lithium assets, and lithium's coming back. We're seeing a lot of column centimetres in the paper about lithium at the moment. Is there still a plan there on the lithium assets, and do you have a plan to drill them anytime soon?
Look, just to preface what I'm about to say, I suppose, is that the market in the last little while hasn't been appreciative of lithium projects and lithium drill results per se. Our projects, we believe, are pretty interesting. We have the main ingredient, of course. We've got pegmatites, and they've got spodumene in them, and we've got some very long strike lengths there. The Kobe body is 7, 8, 9 kilometres long. We've got the second one, the Osborne area, what we call the southern trends. There's about collectively 5 kilometres of strike there. Again, some very high grade rock chip samples that you can get. We're only 25 k's from, and we're within a lithium corridor, demonstrated lithium bearing corridor, and from what's going to be looks like a very significant lithium operation operated by Azure Minerals and their new owners. So look, I think we have not sort of given up on lithium by any means. Okay, our focus is on the copper at the moment, but we are doing things, small things, and looking at our data and where we would put drill holes. One of the perversely, I guess, is one of the perverse things about these pegmatites is that, just for instance, Kobe being so long, how do you attack it? How do you find the thick bit that's full of spodumene? And this is a thing, we believe these bodies need to lay over a bit of depth and thicken up, and to get the quantum of spodumene, or the grades, plus 1% grades that are required, and targeting that when there's not a lot of useful geophysical techniques that can see these bodies. So it can be a little bit challenging, but we are working on it using various techniques, including gravity, to identify places where we could drill when we get our opportunity to do so. So we're in the planning stage of that exercise. Okay, and of course we would alert the market should we actually trundle a drill rig in there to test some of our theories.
Well, as you say, Whundo copper is the focus, rightfully so. Very, very close to infrastructure. The exploration team right on the doorstep, living in a great city of Karratha where everything is there at their fingertips. The infrastructure's there, the opportunity's there, the team's there, and a strong news flow to come. So, Julian, Tom, thanks both for your time. We've got to the end of our Q&A. We've exhausted all our questions, but thank you both for your time.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, David. Thanks to everyone who dialed in.
Absolutely.
And thank you to everyone for joining us for this GreenTech Metals webinar. And a special thanks, as I said, to Tom and Julian for their informative presentation and for answering all the questions. If you'd like to follow up directly with the team, the contact details for GreenTech Metals are now on your screen. And I know Tom and Julian and Angus would be more than happy to answer any questions as they come through. Have a wonderful day, and we look forward to seeing you again.